From the front, Mr. Logan's house was dark, the only one on the street without a lamp shining in the window. It couldn't have been later than 7, so surely Logan wasn't asleep. Teague rapped a quick succession of 5 on the door, followed by a more measured set of 5 when a minute had passed with no response. Almost immediately he saw the window brighten and a corner of the curtain lift. "Teague Scott!" he called. He listened to the latch being drawn, and squinted when Mr. Logan poked the lamp out the door and up to his face. "Captain, come in from the cold. We were just sitting down to a late supper. There's plenty if you'll join us." "No, I'm not hungry. Do you still want me to write for you?" Logan shut the door behind them and glanced at the clock on the parlor mantel. "Well, usually I don't conduct business in my home. I'd be in your debt if you'd look over my journals now." He held up the valise. "You can choose what you like. All written in the field. I've got my earlier ones, too, if you need background." "How many are there?" "10 volumes," he answered, then added quickly before Logan could object, "4 that would interest you." Logan eyed the valise, the figuring of reading hours showing plainly on his face. "Set it down there and have a seat. I'll be back in a minute." He left the lamp on the parlor table, and Teague watched him hurry down the darkened hall and open the door to the kitchen. Logan returned with tinder for a fire, and his wife followed him with a plate of stew and a cup of coffee. While he built the parlor fire, he gave directions for her to brew another pot and bring the captain a cup, but Teague interrupted. "I'm not much of a coffee drinker, thank you." "Suit yourself," Logan said. "It's going to be a long night. Now, where do I start?" Teague pulled from his valise the book with no cover and cleared his throat. "About the middle is First Bull Run. I think it goes to the end of 61. He handed it to Logan, who turned the red-smeared leaves approvingly. "Too bad you can't sell the appearance. People really go for authenticity." He watched the newspaperman make notations on a piece of paper while shaking his head or clucking his tongue. After an hour, Teague could endure no more obvious critiquing and leaned his head against the back of his chair. When he woke to Logan's shaking his shoulder, all 10 volumes lay stacked on the table with a plate of ham and biscuits sitting beside them. Logan motioned to it. "Breakfast?" Teague declined. "What did you think?" Logan sat in a chair across the room from him and lit his pipe. "You can certainly make good use of a pen." "You'll buy some, then?" "Well, I may. I would have to make some hefty changes first." Teague sat straighter in his chair and started fingering the cuff of his jacket. "What kind of changes?" "I'd want to put it more in line with the kinds of stories other papers are printing. A bit less blood, for one. It offends the ladies." "Is that all?" "Some of the descriptions of the men and their vices, like your friend Aubrey, need tinkering. I don't want to encourage any of our youth to imitate them in that respect. The parts about the captain who lost control of himself would have to go entirely. The private he had you shoot? That just won't do." "I thought people go for authenticity." "Yes, but people don't want that kind of truth. They want to know that our side is in the right. Which brings me to another point. A good deal of the commentary must be cut." Logan gave a little hollow laugh. "You just think too much." Teague stared at him until Logan left his seat and paced over to the fireplace. "It's the questioning they can't digest, you see. People around here have gotten to admire you after the raid. If they start reading about how you question your morals, they might start questioning their own. And that's the last thing they want to do. And then there's your thoughts on the war. I can't print that. They put men in jail for that sort of thing." Teague swallowed. "If these changes are made, how much will you pay me?" Logan considered. "I'll give you $5 for the lot." "You offered $1 a column in July." "The raid was fresh in people's minds. They'd have read a description of latrine duty if they thought you'd written it. But that's worn off now." "Then your original offer of 85 cents. I'll sell you columns for a 15-week series from Camp Carradine to Antietam. I need it in advance." "Wait just a minute. 15 weeks is pretty optimistic. And with all the editing I have to do, 85 cents is too steep." "I'll change it myself. If my name's to be put to lies, then at least I'll be the one to write them. When I'm finished, they'll read 15 weeks and beg for more." Logan tapped a finger on the table. "If it must be a lump sum, then I go down to 75 cents a column. Only for the ones I approve, of course." Teague gathered his journals. "You'll have 'em tomorrow." $11.25 didn't last long once Teague put aside some for a stage to Canton, train fare to Sandusky, and enough for his return. Part of the clothing he'd bought from Harry Everett was on credit. Of course, he hadn't said for whom he was buying all that gray flannel. Everett might have felt strange knowing he was outfitting a Confederate. Postage on the package was outrageous. If he'd sent it from Newkirk's post office instead of waiting until he got to Canton, he might have gotten credit for his good name. But he didn't want people there giving him the same kind of look the clerk in Canton gave him when he saw Johnson's Island was on the address. He'd already had to show his military papers twice to prove he was no rebel sympathizer or spy, and the further north he got, the closer to hand he figured he'd have to keep them. About an hour out of Canton, the usher came around with newspapers from the surrounding communities. Teague opted to rest his head against the window and listen to the rhythm of the train's wheels rather than read, but he got the gist of the stories from a well-dressed man a couple of seats in front of him, who summarized items of interest to his wife before passing them to her to read for herself. "There's a story with the ring of truth in it. I can always tell when a piece of writing is bosh. That's the real thing. Out of his own diary, too. No reporter can get that authentic, let me tell you." Teague opened his eyes to watch the man and reached for his pill case. He felt a headache coming on. "True heroes in that story. Stormed over that field like heaven's own angels. Knew they were in for it, too." The man pointed out the section to his wife. The wheels sounded louder to Teague now, amplified by the accompaniment of blood rushing in his ears. "It seems to me they'd be frightened out of their wits," the wife observed. "They were. That's how I see this is real. He admits their fear. But look here. Then the words of my oath came crowding into my mind. Duty overcame fear. I took the wounded man's rifle and powder, and he blessed me for it. Aubrey nodded to me and smiled. The knowledge that we might not live bound us closer than brothers. We turned to face the enemy, trusting in God to deliver us from the field or to deliver our souls from this world." Teague closed his eyes again, trying not to think of the remainder of the piece. Jack Baker's fiancée, the commission to deliver his last letter to her, the bravery with which she bore the news of his death, her vow to marry no other man unless he'd served his country. "Oh my, that poor girl." The wife sighed exactly the response he'd meant to elicit. "Quite a story, eh?" Teague opened one eye and glanced across the aisle to a man with part of a sandwich in his hand. He had addressed him with his mouth half full. "As stories go," Teague answered. "Must make you proud to serve with people like that. Did you lose your leg in the war?" Teague grinned. "In a manner of speaking." "What do you mean?" "I was on furlough in Washington, and this enterprising young woman didn't get payment in advance. When she found out I couldn't pay her, she took a piece of whalebone from a corset and stabbed it. Pop!" Teague emphasized the sound by pounding on his leg. "Right through my knee. Mortification ate it up in a week." The rest of the train ride went without conversation.